Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Explore Yoga Health. Today, we're going to talk about um, the positive emotion of appreciation and how that affects our health. So today, I have an expert that loves to research all of this or research other researchers on this, and that is Jyoti. And I'm going to have her just pause for a minute and tell me tell us a little bit about her and go for it.
Well, I would say I'm kind of qualified to talk about this topic on a couple of different ways. One is on my personal level, in that I grew up with family history of being um, chronic depression along multiple generations. And I certainly had the opportunity to witness or to observe many of my family members going through chronic depression and how appreciation helped them. And in my own life, that's what I began to employ even at a younger age. I set up a very stressful lifestyle for myself in being a type A personality. I became the youngest manager in a tech company and became very stressed out, had autoimmune issues, health issues, and had to force myself into something different. And that's when I began to have a meditative practice. And so, then that second level of my education, I have taught meditation for 25 years. I have a certificate in yoga. And then I also write blogs on, shall we say, neuroplasticity might be the best category to put it in. Anything that assists us in changing um, for a positive direction.
So, because you just said that, that's one of the things that I wanted to at least briefly talk about is the different scientific, or if there is any sort of proof, and it's okay if we don't have particular studies on this one, but the benefits of the positive attitudes over negative attitudes in our life on overall health.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you use the word attitude, because that's really powerful, in that an attitude is a step above just having an emotion. So I think what you're talking about is a step above even potentially where the research is. But the research is talking about just how often do you have particular emotions. And some of the research just on the basics of, shall we say, the basics of appreciation were that it boosts your immunity and increases your longevity. It allows us to experience less stress and enjoy life more. It reduces the mental dialogue that we have, which, let's face it, where does most of our stress come from? And it increases our sense of peace and so forth. And then one of the most exciting things that appreciation has shown is that it increases our cognitive flexibility or our mental flexibility, and that assists us in our problem solving. And so then if we look at just positive emotions in general, whether it's any praise, gratitude, love, any of those, that builds resilience within us and it enhances our well-being, and we experience more social connectivity because of that positiveness within us. And one of the most interesting things that I have found is that it increases our visual attention, expands it. You look at how maybe we don't recognize that often, that we become tunnel vision and we see certain things a certain way over and over again because of our habits. And as we're experiencing more and more positive emotions, our perceptive abilities begin to open up. And again, that's going to assist us in our problem solving and in our experience. And then another great one for positive emotions is that helps us become open to more experience, so that we're not so crushed when something happens that is outside of our normal experience, or our experience that we don't like, but we're actually able to be more open. So lots of studies have
Yeah,
been going on in the
that's
last 20
tons.
years.
I didn't know
Mhm.
that they had proof that it kind of helps our stress levels. Like, so if we are faced with something traumatic, that it helps us
Mhm.
overcome that faster. That's awesome.
Mhm.
So,
Yes.
the next thing that I'm kind of curious of, and this kind of takes us into the appreciation aspect is tons of people will have like gratitude journals and things like that, but they're um, unaware of this emotion of appreciation. And so I thought we could talk a little bit about that because you sent me some studies, and I thought it was very interesting that the
Mhm.
appreciation is a more complex emotion, if
Yes,
I'm
it
saying that
is.
right.
Yes, it is. It's more complex, it's more subtle. And the interesting thing about this research is this particular researcher wanted to identify appreciation separately in in studies on wellness or life satisfaction. And they've already identified a certain number of characteristics that are required for people to have life satisfaction. But they had never really separated out and did a control based on appreciation. And she felt that that was very valuable to do. And indeed, it did prove in her research to be a very valuable way of looking at it. And so she identified gratitude as this outward experience that we have with another person, that that person has actually done something,
Mm.
whether it's uh, some benefit that we received from it, and then we have this response to something they did. So that's really more what gratitude is versus appreciation. And as you said, it is very complex. So first, I'm going to give the most simple definition. Appreciation in its most simple form is just acknowledging a value or a meaning to something, whether it's a person, a behavior, an event, a situation, and just acknowledging, maybe it's even the color of a dress, and just acknowledging within yourself how much you enjoy and appreciate that color in this moment. And then you have a positive emotion from that, but it's not from anything that somebody else has done, for example. But as you said, it is much more complex, and there are quite a few aspects that are required in order to qualify as appreciation. And the first one, and the most one, is to have some kind of focus on realizing that you are in that state of appreciation. Another one is awe. And they use the example of someone being in nature and how you just automatically have this experience of wonder and awe when you see the beauty of nature. And so that is another part of the experience of appreciation. Another one is being able to be aware of the present moment, because if you're not aware of the present moment, how can you appreciate anything really? And then the last one that I think is really important is having a regular behavior or a ritual that identifies and brings in your appreciation, so that it's not something you just think about once every few days, but every day and on a regular basis, you're bringing appreciation into your life. And so those were some of the values. And then the results of that particular study were that first of all, the most important values that they found in somebody having a high level of life satisfaction, which they use to measure your well-being, your sense of well-being. First one is having a positive affect, and that is that in general, you have the positive emotions. And if you don't in general have positive emotions, then you typically aren't going to be bringing in appreciation. So the positive emotions is part of a given. And then higher self-esteem. And then the third thing that was needed to have a good sense of well-being was appreciation. And this was twice as high as gratitude. So it is the appreciation that is much more valuable than gratitude in impacting our life. And another thing that they brought out in the study was that because you had appreciation, or the people who had appreciation actually had more ability in problem solving. So those two seem to be very well tied together, and was a very interesting part of that study.
That's really cool. So it's interesting because it brings up some thoughts in me. Having some exposure to the different psychology behind emotions versus feelings. And you were talking about some of those things, like emotions, in psychological terms, it's kind of the unconscious aspect of who we are, and then the feelings are how we're experiencing, or interpreting our day-to-day movement. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because sometimes people say they were born in a very critical situation, or like you said, maybe their whole families are surrounded by depressed, or anxious types of thoughts, so they've already built up a momentum of a particular interpretation of certain life experiences.
Mhm.
And I know in my life, having come also from, with a family history of depression and some other stresses there, that just having somebody tell me to feel different was an impossibility. That just seemed, it was extremely frustrating to me, in fact. And it wasn't until that I learned some practice in which that feeling wasn't important, but it did create a different foundation. And I was wondering if you could talk some about that.
Well, I can, because I had, shall we say, the exact opposite experience that you did and came to the same conclusion, in that I was creating a mood with my praise and gratitude practice because of my religious upbringing and how we brought praise and gratitude into our life. And so, in order for me to go out the door every morning, I would surround myself with this mood that could take me hours to even create, and think that that was, shall we say, expanding consciousness, or that was expanding love in my life. And then by the time I would get to work, and maybe somebody had, cut me off in traffic, and then I get to work and certain deadlines are needing to be met, and then the phone starts to ring, and pretty soon my mood is gone, and I had no foundation to count on because the mood was gone. And what I found with the practice that you and I now both teach, that we both found to be valuable, was by not creating a mood, by just using the practice innocently as given, that it was creating a very deep foundation well beyond the mood or the emotions or the feelings, and taking me way beyond and creating something that was very strong within myself.
Yeah, that's such a great point, because again, my understanding of the psychology is that emotion is unconscious. And I've been through a class with a neuroscientist that is, his whole focus is studying people that use meditation practices. And one of the things he talks about is how those emotions kind of force you into the low road, so you can't even come to the frontal cortex and process
Mm.
things. And you were saying that earlier about how when those positive emotions are underlying your experience, that your vision gets much, much bigger. And that would be one of those ideal things to expand conscious awareness, where you have the ability to see big picture rather than the fight or flight, the sympathetic
Mm.
nervous system, and all of that.
Yep. And I find it interesting that you bring that up, because you did interview someone a few years ago, and I have listened to that interview. It was with another neuropsychologist, a neurologist that you had taught this practice, and he was quite blown away and he very much explained that frontal cortex being that part where our humanity resides, and the rear of the brain being where our, shall we call it, our animal nature resides. And we're either in the front or we're in the rear. And how the practice that you and I teach actually brings you easily to the frontal cortex and opens it up. And he said it's very binary. You can only do one or the other. You cannot do both at the same time. And so this teaching and that we teach is so powerful, in that it actually easily takes you to the frontal cortex and begins to open that up even when we don't have that. And it begins to help us create that attitude that you were talking about, which is an underlying foundation to our life rather than something we just bring in as a reaction to something.
Yeah, which brings me to the next point that I have, for those that may already use this practice and they're listening, that there can be this thought, well, I use my meditation practice a couple times a day, and that should, be changing my life. And it absolutely does change the foundation. But when we become more consciously aware, we also have the ability to choose what we're going to do in each particular moment, how we're going to react to things, or how we're going to apply our energies, our life energies. And that's where I can see how some of the different practices of appreciation and gratitude, when combined, can be very helpful. For example, as many of you guys know, I study Ayurveda, and one of the things that they talk about in that is something called arasayana. So it's an adopted behavior that you purposefully are putting in practice in the day-to-day life, because that's going to help you in the direction that you're aiming to go, for instance.
Mhm. That indeed is very powerful. I look at my own life when I was at the depth of my depression and I made the choice to employ meditation. The practice that you and I teach wasn't available at that time. And so I learned transcendental meditation. And I began very, very slowly implementing very, very small incremental changes in my life because everything just seemed so overwhelming to me. And it wasn't till I learned this practice that it was much easier. And maybe it was because I had 7 years under my belt of using another practice. But when I learned this practice, things just became easier. And I recognized that there were enormous compromises that I was making in my life and things that just, in the beginning with TM, I did have that experience that there were smaller things that I could do something about and make changes, whether it was just bringing my own creativity into the workplace instead of sitting back and waiting for someone else. But with this practice, I began to make much bigger changes, and it just huge loads came off of my shoulders that I felt like I had been carrying around, because I was carrying around so many ideas in my head about what might happen if this and what might happen if that. And I don't know, the resilience that was being built inside of me with faith, or I don't even know how to call it, but just something was being built inside of me that I could just start letting go of some of those thoughts and some of those belief systems and make some bigger changes in my life. Enormously impacted my health and my well-being.
Yeah, and essentially that's what the studies are showing is that it is an active. I mean, the people that are studied, they don't have the practice of the art of ascension like what we're using,
Exactly.
or maybe even other ones. So they're having to actively participate, and so there is action in utilizing the meditation practice that helps to get at that deeper foundational level. But then there's also the lifestyle choices that help to increase the appreciation rather than the opposite, which is criticizing. And when we're constantly criticizing, that's where you're like what you're pointing to, that constantly thinking and looking at everything around and nitpicking, all of those types of things. That there's value in maybe recognizing, oh, that's what I'm doing with my mind, and I can do something different now, so that the effects of those critical thinking, or well, not critical thinking, because that may be a good thing, but the criticism type of thoughts, how they pull on the nervous system.
Well, one of the reasons for that, just briefly, is that as we are in the back part of the brain and in the fight flight system, that the chemicals that are employed, the chemicals of cortisol and adrenaline, are actually amplifying problems. And so we tend to see them and they look really big and we think we have to really get involved with them. And we don't recognize some of the natural laws in life, which are what we focus on grows. And if I'm focusing on those problems, I'm going to get more of them. And so again, with a practice with praise, with gratitude, forcing or bringing us into that frontal, that activates oxytocin and dopamine and serotonin, and each one of those, and I think that's part of the reason why our perception then opens, is because we have all of these positive chemicals flowing through our nervous system and assisting us. And so obviously those kinds of things are going to be very more helpful the more experience that we have of the positive emotions than the negative, and it helps us to be less judgmental because we are experiencing more. So it sort of, is it the chicken or the egg, and how do you get there? And personally, I don't know how you get there without a practice like what that we teach, that is so simple and so natural and doesn't require that much effort, and we get so many benefits from it in opening us up very quickly and easily without so much effort on our part.
Yeah, we were talking about that briefly before we got started, is beginning in a small way. And you even talked about that in your own personal experiences.
Mhm.
If there's somebody out there listening and they're feeling overwhelmed and they want change, but then they're feeling like, I can't, what do I even do? Because we always want to go from where we are to the desired result. But really, one of the best things that we can do is introducing one new thing. And that may be at first learning a meditation practice, so you can get at the foundation of things instead of attempting to change. And that, like, regardless of whether it was your experience, my experience, or somebody else's experience, where you're putting so much effort into changing your behavior or your attitude, when if we can get at that fundamental aspect of us, then it's much easier to make these different choices in our day-to-day lives. But it's, it can be very beneficial to just start with one thing. So depending on, again, where our audience is, that it may be learning the meditation technique or the art of ascension technique that we're talking about here, that Jyoti and I both have experiences with. Or it may be that you already know that practice, you already utilize that practice, and maybe you're feeling like you've hit a plateau, that there may be some ways in which you can begin to recognize your ability to bring more appreciation, that simple appreciation into your life.
And for those people who do have this practice, I would say it's going back to the basics of this practice. And I am amazed at how much effort I have put in over the years. And when I talk to students, what efforting they are doing, because that is our society's value system. And we think the more effort, the more benefit. And what even you and I as teachers do is we continually pare back and go back to a more and more innocent stance, going back to the very basics. And that's what really, shall we say, applies the lever to our life and makes everything in life easier when we actually are coming back into a more simple way of doing things. And it is the simplicity that helps.
It's really cool that you brought that up, because in a class that I'm taking right now, we're talking about the social, the benefits of a social structure, like clubs and groups and all of those things. And in the literature of expansion of consciousness, they always say like-minded individuals. And it's just was really cool for me to listen to that, because it also brings the power to coming to events where that's what people's intention is the praise, gratitude, and love. And if you don't know, that's basically what the foundation of the art of ascension is. It's all of these positive emotions, and not creating moods like Jyoti was talking about, but actually getting into the foundational level and beginning to transform life from the inside out. And a part of that is, recognizing or being around individuals that can begin to show us like-minded groups when maybe we're making choices that we could be doing something different. I just loved the humility aspect. Everybody wants to learn something and automatically become, an enlightened being, which is great. And that would be great if everybody just did do that, but that there is some effort involved in that. And a lot of that effort is the focus, like you said, what you focus on grows. So when you surround yourself by other individuals of like-minded intentions and all of that stuff, then that can really help that propel much, much faster.
Definitely. Absolutely.
And part of my reason in saying that is having Jyoti on here, I want to let people know how to connect with her, and that she is a very active teacher who has courses at different locations around the United States, and probably would do them in other locations.
Mhm.
We have some international teachers as well, but Jyoti is very active, and she does not only the beginner courses, but then she also has retreats and things like that where individuals can come with others and practice and spend some time deepening that practice in their own understanding and ultimately expanding their conscious awareness. I don't know if you want to say anything
Yeah.
about that or.
Well, yeah, I would say that I'm have in the next 6 months scheduled the north, south, east, and west of the United States. And so if you're interested, there's courses, and my website is Shining Light on Life, and I have the courses listed there, both learning and as well as ones that where we can do 1 to 3 day retreats, and people can come and dive in a little bit more deeply on a self-paced basis and experience more in on the inside, and strengthening that inside to bring out in their life.
And I forgot to ask you before we got started, because I know that you do some blogging. So some of the information that you shared with me can be found. Is that also there on your website if people want to go and read or follow you or?
I don't have appreciation up on that particular blog. I've had it up on other blogs, which are not currently right now. So I will start putting more of that on to my own blog, which has a pretty big array of things about meditation and neuroplasticity and how it works.
Okay,
So.
awesome.
Mhm.
And I don't know, do you have any other closing thoughts for our audience before we sign off? Or
Um, I would just say to remember that what we focus on grows, and the more that we can bring in more praise, gratitude, and love, and employ that in our life, practice or no practice, it does require that we put something of loving into our life to bring that. And we use the word ascension in our practice, art of ascension. And I would just say one thing is that ascension doesn't mean we're leaving our body. It means we're actually activating our body and bringing unconditional love into our body, and every cell of our body begins to be enlivened with that. And so anything we can do to bring that unconditional love into our life is a form of ascension. And it's a way for anybody, no matter what culture, no matter what background you are, to bring that into your life.
awesome. So awesome. And just to let you guys know, I will have Jyoti back because, as she's alluding to, she has quite a bit of knowledge of different types of things and the how those can help expand the positive emotions in our lives and how to apply all of that. So we'll have her back. And one of the best ways that you can be notified of that is by subscribing to the channel. Also, liking this video helps more people see it. And it was great to have you here, Jyoti, and I look forward to having you next time.
I enjoyed it. Thank you, Shivani.